The words we use, both in communicating with ourselves and with others, have an enormous power over them and you. It's not only the actual words themselves, but also the way that we speak them. Verbal inflections, tone, body language, and most of all, the emotion behind them. All of these have a deep effect on our perception of ourselves, our behavior, and the truth of the reality that we create on a moment-by-moment basis. Words are magic, as they cast spells on your perception and imagination. After all, why do you think they call it spelling? But we're saving that story to share in a later episode. As for today, this is part 1 of the Infinite Power of Words series, including a recent interview with Laurel Erica, a linguistic evolutionary and the creator of word magic that unravels mass hypnosis and elevates the frequency of consciousness. So through this series, you will understand how words can be utilized as potent tools, akin to magic spells, which are often dismissed as mere fantasy and folklore, when the reality of the matter is that words' influence pervades our world, shaping our perceptions and our actions. Those who have mastered these secrets have discovered how to exert their influence for personal and business gain. For at their core, words harness the most primal force in the universe. And to have infinite mastery over this force, one will wield unprecedented power to elevate themselves to positions of influence and authority with but a whisper.
That we open up with such a powerful topic that's really at the heart and soul of creation in the infinity matrix.
Indeed.
Okay. Now I want you to think about what is the thing in every single person's reality that has ultimate power. I mean, ultimate power. The thing that's omnipresent, meaning that it's everywhere, all the time, for everyone. We all think them, we all hear them. Every one of us uniquely adopts or creates their meanings. We consciously and unconsciously formulate and select them every time we speak, sing, write, and even read them every day, all the time. And of course, I'm talking about words. Yes, words. I've been a word junkie, a word geek, if you will, for a long time, really studying the impact and the power that words can have on an individual's experience. So yes, words and the worlds they create is going to be our theme. There's a quote from the scriptures: in the beginning, there was the word. Okay, going all the way back, even if you think about it, all the way back to the moment of conception in the womb. We now know through Dr. Bruce Lipton's work on biology of beliefs that even back then, that words can and do have an impact on the world we come to know and experience. Well, Ross and I believe that 2022 is a pivotal year for the collective consciousness on this version of Earth, a pivotal year to make shifts toward more empowerment and expansion into more of what we were meant to be individually and as a species. So this year, what we're doing is we're taking these live streams to a whole new level for you. Now, it is important to understand that we've we've been giving you already in the form of information and infinity matrix hacks some really, really powerful stuff. And so like it's like unlike anyone else that's giving content out there that we're aware of currently. So please make sure you go back and catch up on the episodes that you've missed, and episodes that you know you should be putting on repeat. Again, become part of the members group. You'll get the replay link, the new replay link, and then you'll be able to watch all of that on the site. Now, our objective is to bring things together in even more cohesive ways that will lay foundations that will assist you in your ability and your capacity to transform your environment, your behaviors, your capabilities, your beliefs, your identity, and even your connection with and acceptance of your essential role in how all that is experiencing all that is. And whatever name you give that, God, universe, whatever name you give that. Okay? This month, our streams will have the theme of words have power. So let me set the tone with a quote that I found some time ago, which kind of sums it up nicely. Words are singularly the most powerful force available to humanity. We can choose to use this force constructively with words of encouragement, or destructively using words of despair. Words have energy and power with the ability to help, to heal, to hinder, to hurt, to harm, to humiliate, and to humble. And I don't know who the individual, but it's Yehuda Berg is, and I just remembered it when I read it. I loved it. I copied it, and I thought I knew I'd be using it at some point. And as far back as they've been around, they've been the object of fascination, worship, and in some cases, terror. The words we use in our lives are like they're like a hidden code that's always been there in our reality to access, while containing secret powers of transformation and evolution. So stick around on this stream as we discuss the long evidence of and history of how words create the worlds we live in. Here's our promise to you. You will be able to consistently step into a destiny that is full of meaningful and profound experiences, including, but not limited to, having better communication with those you interact with daily, stronger, more enriching and heart-connected relationships. You'll be able to improve your overall well-being while achieving your innermost desires with more ease and flow. That's a big promise, but if you stick with us for these 4 chapters, you're going to get a lot of really great stuff. So if any of that sounds appealing to you, you're going to want to make sure you stick around for today's full episode and come back to the other 3 chapters in this series. The 4 streams this month are put together to increase your conscious and your unconscious ability to fully harness the power, the most powerful and influential aspect of the infinity matrix, so that it becomes one of your greatest skills in creating the reality you desire. It's literally the most accessible code available, and no one, I mean no one, can stop you from wielding it to serve your every need and desire in this life.
Although they have tried.
and you can allow them to, but you're still giving that power to them.
Exactly.
Right? And, astronomer and scientist Carl Sagan says, it's a form of magic that can create entire universes from a single page.
I love Carl. We miss you, Carl. We do. Let's talk a little bit about words and language. And it all started back when humans were basically animals. And the human animal starts with a stimulus. Then they see an image and they hear a sound. or feel a sensation. And this triggers a thought, which creates a response, perhaps a sound, a, ooh, oh, grunt. Then multiple sounds get mashed together, and that creates a word. And that word becomes a string of words, a sentence, into a paragraph, into a story, and a language is created. So, with this in mind, and distilled down even further, a language is simply a collection of sounds or symbols arranged in specific orders. With the simplest of languages having only two: your computer, ones and zeros. It is the simplest of languages. So no one really knows for sure when language evolved, but fossil and genetic data shows that all human groups have a language. Language itself, or at least the capacity for it, is probably at least 150,000 to 200,000 years old, taking its form from engravings on the cave walls. In their paper Natural Language and Natural Selection, researchers Steven Pinker and Paul Bloom theorized that this series of sounds or gestures evolved over time into combinations, thus giving us a more complex system of communication or language. As things became more complicated around them, the human needed a more concise system to convey information to one another. A perfect example is the glossary of medicine. You ever notice that doctors speak so concise, so detailed? They have a whole different encyclopedia of words. So these authors, they theorized it to have gone like this. The human sees a group of deer he wants to hunt. He grunts a sound to his hunting partner that means deer nearby. One day, a storm comes in, and the hunter notices that thunder scares the deer away. As a result, the hunter and his family goes hungry until the storm passes. Over time, the same hunter also learns to recognize the warning signs for bad weather, dark skies, and increased winds. Early man realizes that when the sky darkens and the wind picks up, he needs to tell his hunting partner to speed up the pursuit of the deer. Therefore, he comes up with a series of grunts that reference both the deer and the bad weather. Ah! What do you got? That series of grunts was the beginning of an evolutionary adaptation that eventually became language. And as humans learned more about how to best survive, they developed a need to communicate these survival methods to their population. And that's the adaptation theory in a nutshell. Now, Noam Chomsky, from my introduction, and Stephen Gould, however, hypothesized that language may have evolved simply because the physical structure of the brain evolved. And the latest in DNA testing is quickly becoming the theory of choice. Sorry about that. I don't know how to turn that off. The theory of neuroplasticity holds true to the second hypothesis, that cognitive structures that were used for things like tool making or rule learning were also good for complex communication. Both fall in line with the theory that as our brains became larger, our cognitive functions had the ability to now increase, as how the hunter recognized the patterns between the deer and the storm. Darwin called this evolution of language pre-adaptation, which is now known as exceptation. We understand why language began. So how did language begin? Our language is so unique among all forms of animal communication because all animals communicate, but ours is so unique. It is unlikely that any other species, including our close genetic cousins, the Neanderthals, ever actually had a language. Surprisingly, language evolution shares many features with biological evolution. And this has made it useful for tracing recent human history and for studying how culture evolves among groups of people with related languages. A case can be made that language has played a more of an important role in our species in the last 200 years of evolution, more than has the evolution of our genes.
Yeah.
Language is distinct from all other known animal forms of communication in being compositional. Human language allows speakers to express thoughts in sentences comprising subjects, verbs, and objects, such as I kicked the ball, and recognizing past, present, future tenses. Where have we heard that before? Kicked, kicking, will kick. This versatility gives human language an endless capacity for generating new sentences as we combine and recombine sets of words into their subject, their verb, and their object roles. For instance, with just 25 different words for each role, it is already possible to generate over 15,000 distinct sentences. That's crazy. Gary, we should run this algorithm with the infinity process. I bet we surpass it.
Yeah, well, actually, I've already crunched the numbers on that, and when the infinity process is fully activated in a person's matrix, it generates neuropsychological communication events to the tune of over 10 to the power of 23. So that's 10 followed by 23 zeros on a daily basis, impacting the reality we create and experience. And actually, this would be a good topic to tap into on, and add into the mix on Saturdays Down the Rabbit Hole.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know, you can join us on Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. PST. It's scrolling on the bottom here. We have a live Zoom call to have a conversation about whatever really you want to have a conversation about, including going deeper into today's topic or answering questions to get clarity on what we're saying or things we brought forth to get some insight from you. All you have to do is go to hackingtheinfinitematrix.com/rabbit hole, and it will take you to the Zoom registration page. Just enter your info, and Zoom will send you the Zoom link for the live event on Saturday morning, 8 a.m. PST. That's hackingtheinfinitematrix.com/rabbit hole. We'd love to see more of you out there. We're having a great group every week. It's building a great community and having some awesome conversations.
It really is. I mean, it's an open conversation, and it's amazing. It really is. We love it. It's kind of our favorite show of the week so far. Yeah. So as where non-human animal communication is principally limited to repetitive acts directed toward a specific end. Like, I'll give you an example, like most ape sign language, for example, is concerned with requests for food. And there's a trained chimpanzee called Nim Chimpskis. It's if you haven't figured this out, it's a play on Noam Chomsky.
That's right.
I don't know if that's something to be honored by or like, what? So anyhow, Nim, who has the longest recorded utterance when translated from sign language, was give orange me, give eat orange me, eat orange, give me, eat orange, give me you. Which kind of reminds me of something I heard on last week on New Year's Eve. So that's kind of how it works. And I know we see lots of lots of news articles saying, that, this particular animal can communicate, but it's not a real communication in terms of how humans communicate. But scientists observe that the formation of different languages and of distinct species, and the proofs that both have developed through a gradual process, are curiously the same. They also asserted that the survival and preservation of certain favored words in the struggle for existence is natural selection. This is so cool. So, for example, you've heard the term a dead language. Not language of the dead, a dead language. One that lost its battle through evolution. And the simplest example is that words that are used more often, such as I, he, she, it, the, you, tend to be shorter and consequently easier to pronounce than less frequently used words such as obstroparious, which means noisy and difficult to control.
Like your phone.
What's that?
Your phone is obstroparious.
And then another one is cataphylactic, which is it's a piece of a coffin. And but this is an example of a form of natural selection, except here, instead of biological individuals competing for the physical environment, words compete for space in the environment of the human mind.
Yeah.
Our minds give preference to shorter versions of frequently used words, presumably to reduce effort. And this pressure is relaxed among the less frequently used words, allowing them to be longer. It might also be the case that once the frequently used words have occupied the space of possible short words, there are fewer opportunities for the less frequently used words, and thus they fall away. You'll notice this as we progress through our trainings in the coming year. And I'll go into dead languages more on Saturday's rabbit hole as well, if that's where the direction that we go. And again, just another reminder, Saturdays, 8 a.m. Pacific time. The link is streaming down of the screen. So grab on and jump on. It's a lot of fun. Nevertheless, though, language as a whole is an amazing development. No other natural communication system is like human language. Human language can express thoughts on an unlimited number of topics, like love and joy, faith and war, the past, the future, mathematics, gossip, fairy tales, how to fix the kitchen sink. Virtually anything. It can be used not just to convey information, but to solicit information with questions. Where does that sound familiar? And to give instructions. Unlike any other animal communication system, it contains an expression for negation. In other words, what is not the case. Every human language has a vocabulary of tens of thousands of words built up from several dozen speech sounds. Each one can build an unlimited number of phrases and sentences out of the words, plus a collection of prefixes and suffixes, and the meaning of sentences are built from the meanings of the individual words. What is still more remarkable is that every typically developing child learns verbally this whole system just from hearing others use it. That's amazing. And some of those children are learning multiple languages at the same time. Language has played a prominent and possibly preeminent role in our species' history. Consider that where all other species tend to be found in the environments their genes adapt them to, humans can adapt at the cultural level, acquiring the knowledge and producing the tools. This comes down to language, processing language. Humans have had a high fidelity code for transmitting detailed information down the generations. Seems that we left out that part about how to best utilize our minds, but that's what our master labs are all about. So then humans learn the story concept, the parables, sonnets, and sermon syndrome. This is the articulation of language in order to soothe, serenade, and sometimes stifle the thoughts of the listener or reader. The modifying of the meaning of words and phrases in order to control the architecture of hidden ideas buried within sentences and phrases, such as to manipulate ideas of, let's say, race, gender, and spirituality, and much, much more. They are seen as trying to change the definition of words, which seems weird and kind of sinister at least. But the most sinister of language manipulation is the reduction of word vocabularies, or even worse, the withholding of one's ability to read or comprehend their own language. That's how control can be maintained. Because when you limit the number of words, you limit the available thoughts that they could create.
Yeah, you go from the 25 to 10.
Exactly.
Right?
And thus the number and quality of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
You limit that. So now you're not going to be able to think of as many ideas or thoughts, or the quality of those ideas or thoughts. Limiting the ability to question. That's what this does. It limits the ability to question the status quo, to narrow the range of thought, and in the end, making radical thinking literally impossible. Because there will be no words in which to express it. The link between words and knowledge is what makes language so crucial. And something we're going to go into further in episode 68 in a couple of weeks as part of this month's Power of Words theme. So make sure you tune in. The idea that a human being's language represents a state of some component of the mind is an idea that continues to baffle many experts. The great founders of modern science were awed by the fact that language permits us to construct from 25 to 30 sounds in an infinite variety of expressions, which, although not having any resemblance in themselves to that which passes through our minds, nevertheless do not fail to reveal all of the secrets of the mind and to make intelligible to others who cannot penetrate into the mind all that we conceive and all that of the diverse movements of our soul. I have something in my mind. This is what Gary and I have been doing for the last year. We have something in our mind, and we are using language to share it with you. So now it's in your mind. Descartes said the human capacity for unbounded and appropriate use of language has a primary basis for his postulation of mind as a new creative principle. In later years, there's occasional recognition that language is a creative activity that involves infinite use of finite means. In other words, I have 25,000 words, but they create an infinite variety of uses and meanings. There's also been awareness that these capacities are a species proprietary, shared by humans and unique to them, and it being the most striking feature of this curious of us as an organism, as the foundation for our remarkable achievements.
Yeah. I mean, the and we really want to get across the idea that words have been under the radar, if you will, in so many ways, and how they can impact both the positive side of things and the negative side of things in your experiences. And if we don't put attention on it, then we'll never be able to have control over it. Therefore, we are never in control of our reality that we create. Right. And the first step of that is understanding the background of words and, the impact they've had, so we can see the evidence. Right. And now that you're getting a grasp of that background of the words and the impact they have in creating the world you experience, let's start to look at how some of that structure has come to be and what it's involved into. And Ross mentioned earlier about the mashing of sounds, creating words, then evolving to a more complex structure like a full language, complete with the collection of lexicon of relevant and culturally agreed upon words, right? But let's look deeper, because we've found that by doing so, we can uncover some of the building blocks of reality in the infinity matrix.
Yep.
So let's go back to the beginning here a second. As far as we know, right, we began with signs and symbols. And those signs and symbols, we gave specific meaning to them. Then we learned the value in measuring these things in order to get the advantage for survival. So a numerical system was established. Then combined, and over time, an order and even a hierarchy was given to the symbols to create an alphabet. Now, did you know that alphabet was derived from the first two letters of the Greek alphabet, which is alpha and beta? Right? So just in that alone, it's creating the formation of what we consider to be this thing called language. Okay, this systemized approach to ordering these symbols also allowed us to combine the symbols to have multiple meanings and in the form of words, as Ross was talking about, which allows us to bring things into reality with meaning and purpose. Because if you don't have a word to describe something, you can't experience that something. Okay. Now, sometimes it's an unconscious word or unconscious definition or formulation, so it may not necessarily always be conscious, but it's formulated through a word that we've given a definition to. Right. In order for you to understand and have in your awareness a fork, a utensil called a fork, right? You had to have the word and the definition of that word, which then formulated that. And at some point, it didn't exist, but then someone came up with the idea, gave it a word, and then form came to it. Okay? These words then led way to sentences, which opened up possibilities of declaring some things to be real and others to be not real. And the more we could declare reality, the stronger it became. Right? If you think about someone who's stuck on something being a certain way, they have strong words to confirm that, to reinforce that, to emphasize that, to hold on to that, to enhance the experience. And so to enhance the experience, we turn those declarations into full stories of reality. All right. And as our worlds became more complex, we developed life themes to encompass all of those words, all of those alphabets, and bring the reality we experience to life moment to moment. And before you run off thinking this is just some lesson in linguistics or history of language, I urge you to look deeper and understand that what we're telling you is that none of what you experience would be possible without words. And what we're revealing is not just an essential ingredient of the infinity matrix, but the essential ingredient. Okay, so we're revealing not just an essential ingredient of the infinite matrix, it's the essential ingredient. You'll see over the span of these live streams that are focused on words have power, you'll see that the power has been right under your nose. It's been there, right there for you to access at your fingertips, if you will, to craft the reality you desire the whole time you've been alive. So it's about time. Make 2022 the time you deeply consider the when, the where, the how, the what, and the why words are impacting your reality every moment of every day you exist.
I just was operating on a different frequency than the people around me, and it didn't go well, but it sure...
It rarely does.
Yes. But it sure ultimately led me to focus on words, and in many cases to cloister myself and just spend hours playing with them, and finding a new word or a new rhyme just would set me up for such an exciting day. Just feeling it and hearing it would rock my world. And so I have a big collection of really interesting words, and I wrote a thesis about them, a manuscript in the 80s called Psychosemantics, English in Translation. And I showed it to an editor at a publishing house who thumbed through it in a rather indifferent manner and said, well, this is all quite interesting and consistent with semiotics and deconstructionism, which I'd never heard of. But he told me, excuse me, he told me that without a PhD, the power of letters after your name, without those letters, I had no credibility to say what I say. And the other, I'm so sorry. I think this is the first I've been speaking today. I woke up quite early and then just was working on a blog I just about completed that answers these questions, and it's called, let me find its title because I like what I've settled on. It's called Being of Sound Mind, How Word Magic Wordplay Saved My Sanity, Awakened Jeepers, I'm so sorry, you guys. I should have practiced speaking. And anyway, how word magic wordplay saved my sanity, awakened my awareness to the matrix of this reality and what it might possibly do for you.
Wow.
So my life situation was a perfect setup to focus on what I'm sure I came here to do, and reinforcing that conviction and why I thought at such an early age that I knew all the words in the language. I read many years later in a book called Healing Mantras by Ashley Farrand, that in the court of Queen Elizabeth I, the wisest, most educated man in the arts and sciences, as well as the esoteric arts and sciences, was John Dee. And there was the belief at the time that structured metered verse paired with music could calm hostilities. So he was working with a cabal of French and English poets, working in that sort of verse to create like a secret weapon for world peace. And when I read that, I thought I was there. And that's why I thought at such an early age that I knew the language backward and forward, and I've done a lot of turning it backward. And that's what I encourage other people to do. For instance, I call it turning it inside out and back.
Oh man, I do this all the time. Oh my gosh, I love this. Go ahead.
Well, I want to hear some of what you discovered, Gary, but I want to share a little story and then I think your audience will quickly catch on to this. I was thinking once that any metaphysical philosophy, if you don't understand it, is dogma. And if you do understand it, is unnecessary. So I looked at dogma. I always found it to be a very odd word. And then it revealed its secret to me. So why don't we invite listeners to take a few moments just to look at dogma inside out and backward and see what you can learn about it.
Okay, do you want to take the lead on that?
Are you speaking of me,
Yeah.
to me or to Gary? I just took the lead. The lead was I offered the invitation. Look at the word dogma, turn it inside out and backward and see what you
So
find.
meaning the letters, rearranging letters?
Yeah, do whatever you want. Take that little word. And I've given a big hint. And I'll let you know in just a moment.
Okay. So, I mean, if you split it apart, you had dog, ma, but then if you switch the dog, it's God. And if you move the ma to beginning, it's ma God. What else could you do with it? Or go mad.
Anybody in the audience texting in?
Deb's got am God.
That's it. Once you know that's who you are, you don't need any
Nice.
prescriptions.
There you go.
Which is backwards, right? So it's spelled backwards. It's nice. Okay,
Yeah,
nice.
that was the hint. Turned it inside out and
Nice.
backward. Yeah. I've long considered this dimension of existence to be backward land. And I wrote my extensive feriography as an elemental being who goes through the looking glass into this dimension and has to deconstruct the language to find her way out back home again. And so early on, she says, I was born in upside down town to the king and queen of backward land. I spoke a foreign language, which they had to twist to understand. The king was sowing sorrow and the queen was reaping grief. I held my dreams, but lost my way, confused beyond belief. So I've long thought of this dimension of existence as backward land. And then I was delighted once to find this statement in the introduction to a book called The Way of Weird, Tales of an Anglo-Saxon Sorcerer. And this introduction by Dr. Fred Wolfe says, when the Christians came to power in Britain, anything heathen was automatically bad. Consequently, everything that had a strong meaning to the Anglo-Saxons was reversed 180 degrees. And when I read that, I thought, there it is, there's backward land. And it concludes by saying this reversal not only affected the people and their traditions, but also the English language we use today.
That's cool. So that's interesting because I mean, when and that's definitely a new twist on it for me. When I say I do the flipping inside out back, what I do is I look at like the meaning of words. So for example, And I've taught this on different streams before. Just a simple thing of understanding the meaning of a simple sentence and how it can have such ambiguity in every aspect of it.
Yes.
And in order for us to process the understanding, we have to take in all of the ambiguity meanings and then come out with something that's going to relate with those around us. So, for example, the looking forward to the weekend, right? So we just take those two words, right? Then what we're doing is we're looking forward to the ambiguity of week, which is, we consider 7 days of the week, right? Which is the whole other ambiguity in that. And then we say, okay, well, then that there's no strength, right? Weak means no strength, means lack of power, right? So why would you look forward to that on a regular basis, right? And then end, the definition and the understanding of that is the something coming to a completion. So it's there's all this ambiguity in our languaging that if we were to understand that we don't just take the surface information of the language we read or hear, we take in all of it, and then after it's processed, then we got to come back out and filter out what's agreed upon with those around us in the matrix that we're experiencing, right? So for me, I say, okay, well, so the backwards part of it, what I do is I say, well, what's the opposite of weak? Well, it's strong or empowered, or so then what I say is, well, have a good, strong beginning instead of a good weekend. Right? So I'm taking what you're doing, those very cool. We're actually taking the words themselves and looking at from that layer of the matrix, which is really cool. I like that. And to add that into the mix of things, I think that's pretty cool. So I like the deconstructing of the language, and even morning, right? Have a good morning. Well, ambiguity of morning has a couple different meanings to it, right? So why would you want to have a good one when every time you're waking up? So have a good awakening.
Well, when we say to each other good morning, we're essentially saying good grief on a subliminal level.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And in terms of weekend and strong beginning, my sense of things is for tuning up words. I believe we need to evolve the language through the invention of new words and metaphors, but also tuning up familiar ones. And so what I've done with weekend is strengthened. And I once asked a group of people in my secret spells of the English language, that first video is when I go through what I call our premier life sentence, which includes those words that you're citing. And I point out that our most prevalent greeting to each other is hello. And if you reverse the syllables, you have oh hell. So I once asked a group of people, what shall we do about this? And this woman, who was fittingly a midwife, said, how about hallow? Nice. And to hallow is to honor as sacred. And each one of us is as the infinite, infinite form. Each one of us is sacred. And that little tuning up, that's what we're doing here now for all of us on this evolutionary journey. We're doing our best to tune up our frequency, to be vibrating at a higher level so that we're resonating with goodness, beauty, love, kindness, wisdom. And it just comes to us, embodies in us, flows through us, and we all lift each other together.
So Laurel, where do these oddities originate from? And how do they spread into integrate themselves into, so deeply into a language?
Okay, let me get to that in just a moment. So the question is, how do these peculiarities pop up in language? And the two that are most familiar to most people where words speak for themselves and reflect us back to ourselves are the two words dis-ease. And we go, oh, right, stress equals the greater chance for illness. And the other is history or his story. And we recognize, oh, right, it's not just a factual accounting of events, it's the victor's telling of the tale. It's very propagandistic and self-serving, but not so accurate. So, and that gives me an opportunity for, in terms of how do these things arise? Yes, I do believe some of them are manipulated and concocted, and I think others are naturally occurring, because I believe that we are, as speakers of this language, or any language, is like a hall of mirrors and an echo chamber. It's constantly inputting and outputting within and from us, and it's echoing and mirroring, as far as I can see at the moment, echoes or mirrors either cultural consciousness or higher consciousness. So the words that reverberate with cultural consciousness, I generally call those secret spells, because they're hiding one of these ambiguities that you, or more, that you were talking about, Gary. So the secret
That's awesome.
spells are the ones that resonate with cultural consciousness, and they program our thinking. The word is the lens through which we see the world, and as we see it, so be it. Yeah. We are creating through our perceptions and our thoughts and verbalizations. And I just want to step back for a moment. Gary, when you talked about ambiguity, I took a course when I was at the university, Berkeley in the 60s, a wonderful historic moment. So I had a course in structural English grammar, and the professor said this will neither improve your speaking ability or your writing, but it's interesting. And he spoke about the 7 forms of ambiguity. And one that I remember best was, he said the lyrics from his favorite Calypso song was, I kiss her hands, I kiss her lips, and I leave her behind for you. So that's a little fun joke. And
I got that. I don't know if everybody got that, but I totally got that.
Okay. Well, so I'll say it with a different intonation. I kiss her hands,
you got to do the structural ambiguity on that.
And I leave her behind for you to kiss. So yes, we can be saying many different things using the same collection of words. And when I took a master's degree program in spiritual psychology from the University of Santa Monica, which is not Santa Monica College, but there was often a message to us that the message sent is not the message received. So we can think that we're agreeing upon something that's contained in a verbal vibration and yet be miles apart. And so it's so easy for me to go on and on. So raise your hand and let me know.
Well, we're getting tons of comments, and so everybody's loving it. Their words have power, changing vibration, physical environment. Words are spells. One of the things I say regularly is that the words you use are either declaring the reality you're in, or they're in the process of invoking the reality you're stepping into.
Oh, I like that. That's very good.
right? So it's you're either declaring. So people say that's the power of it, right? So they're either declaring the crap they're in or the good they're in. They're declaring it when they talk about it, or they're invoking that reality to step in. So really, to be careful of the words you use.
Yes. Well, and that then circles round to what else I wanted to say, and I'll get back to the bigger question, Ross, about these quirky idiosyncrasies in language that most of us thought were limited to the words dis-ease and his story, not recognizing that the word is constantly speaking back to us. So, how do these quirky things happen? Yes, certainly they're implanted like sound bites, but not the good ones. I think those just naturally arise. But sound bites like defund the police. Now, we know that isn't what it means. It means reallocate resources, but somehow that sound bite was injected, picked up, and projected widely, even though it's guaranteed to start an argument.
Right. Sure.
So what a waste of breath. And there's quite a few others. And
we talk about this in, I think it was in the word series that we did, just even using the word imagination. We break that up. It's magi nation, and magi is we're a nation of magicians.
That is wonderful. I completely agree. And collectively, we have the power to turn this life stream we are co-creating moment by moment, waking and sleeping, and programmed by the language to do it from a certain lens. We are co-creating as we think, speak, and write. So as we get more conscious of how we are being used by the language to propagate a consciousness that we are endeavoring to elevate ourselves above, we can reinvent words, reinvent language. Even Thomas Jefferson said something like, I have the quote, but not in front of me, new times require new words and the assignment of new meanings to old words, something like that. The recognition that the language needs tuning up, the earliest recognition I've come upon was Confucius, who said, if given charge of the governance of a country, the first thing he would do would be to correct the language. And he explains why. So we can do that and create a new vision of reality collectively.
Exactly. Laurel, do you see language in itself as evolving or devolving?
At the moment, it's definitely and probably intentionally by quote, the powers that be devolving. We may be getting more words, but so many of them are meaningless jibber jabber that people go into a war of words over. You didn't say it correctly, as the language is changing every day. I mean, anyway, I won't go into the absurdity, but I have some quotes, some wonderful statements about this. They're on my website, a whole collection of them. I think it's under information, words on words. There's a marvelous quote about, there's decline of a language is the decline of the life of the people that use it.
Well, one of the things that Gary and I are insistent on with everyone is their definitions that they use. So when someone comes upon you and they have a comment or a snide remark, whatever it might be, it's always about well, what does that mean? What's your definition of that? Because we're finding that, just as you said, there's so much convolution in the meaning of words now. And it's constantly changing over and over again. And it's interesting, in my mind, in my recollection, I think it started with Bill Clinton when he was going, Well, it depends on what your definition of is.
Right. Right.
And I think that kind of started a small revolution of, oh yeah, so we can change those definitions. And we find that whether it be with politicians or marketing or PR firms or whatever the case, of slowly just making these slow incremental changes to specific words, and then their definition changes along with that. And sometimes it's on purpose, and sometimes it's kind of like, well, it's perhaps maybe a way of getting around a situation. But because of now we have, well, back then it was just television, but now we have social media, which is is definitions on steroids. I mean, they're just kind of mutating every which way you turn. And that's where my question came from, because you've talked about in a lot of your previous interviews and on your YouTube channel, about how people are, the definitions and the words are being kind of manipulated, and people are being steered.
And steer is a castrated bull.
Yeah, exactly.
So don't be steered.
Well, so but that's part of one of my questions is, how do you come up with steer, a castrated bull, and steer the car?
How did that happen?
How do all of these happen where you're like, or as you mentioned and Gary mentioned, you have days of the week. Well, okay, so
how did that come about?
How did they come up with the word week when they'd already had a definition?
See, a lot of people, all of my work is conjecture.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And
research, though.
Well, I've read a little bit, but it's more based on downloads.
Sure.
And even as we speak. So a lot of people want to know who did this to us. And you can just imagine these, old wizards on high stools at desks with feathers in their manuscripts, manipulating language to manipulate the software programming of the mind. And to some degree, we know that happens, certainly on the level of sound bites and memes and just what you were speaking about, changing the meanings of words. I mean, I have to stop before I can continue on, because to point out that definition is we are deafened to our definitions. So how can we possibly be a sound mind?
Mm-hmm.
And now we talk about what words mean. Let me read to you the opening from my little blog called The Mean Meaning of Mean. It's just a paragraph. And it says, in addition to intention and signification, mean also means offensive, selfish, nasty, small-minded, negative, stingy, ignoble, inferior in quality, of little importance, bad-tempered, in poor condition, shabby, and average.
Yeah.
So do you still want to know what a word means? I mean, it's just hilarious. What it means to me is we need new language to evolve it. And one of the words is ignoble, which of course is the opposite of noble. And most nobility is ignoble, whether they're born into a royal bloodline or just the heirs of most of the world's wealth. They cannot be noble or nobility unless they follow the prescription in that word, which is no bull. It's unequivocal. You are either living in your high intention and integrity, then you are truly noble. But anything less does not make the grade.
Nice. Yeah, and you mentioned, so just one of the things, again, that I internally for myself and with certain people, I'll use the language in, because I think for the average person, the shock of, hey, have a good strong beginning is too much of a shift for them, right? One of the things is when I hear, close friends, family, and colleagues doing things like, well, in the meantime, well, no, hold on, who's making time something that's mean, or how about doing it in the nice time, because then we can enjoy the experience.
Or we even already have the phrase "in good time."
Yeah, in good time. Yeah.
So, and I completely agree. The closer we can get to the familiar sound, so it's like we're taking a flat note and tuning it up, sharpening it.
Right.
It's like it's a huge piano. Every key is a key of knowledge, the
Like
English language. And we talk about notes, we talk about composing, and we are the human instrument. We get to play the piano, and those vibrations we elicit move through the human instrument, and they play us organ by organ. So if the goal is to tune up and not to degrade, then go for the beauty, go for the sweetness, go for the kindness, go for the truth as you know it, from a place of nobility. When you know it energetically and essentially, and according to your essence, that this is authentic. That's what to share. Conjecture, gossip, rumor, what for? I have such a gorgeous quote. Let me see. Oh my goodness. Yes, I can find it.
So one of our listeners, Melanie, has a question. She goes, "What are your thoughts about the brain's inability to process negation, such as do not touch, and the brain perceives it as do touch? So rather than I am sick, stating I am not well."
Right. Or, yes, what do I think of it? That
Yes.
the brain, I think it's the brain. I'm sorry, am I interrupting?
Nope, go ahead, please.
Okay. So again, all conjecture. The brain, the subconscious creative mind, does not have an on-off switch. I once heard in my mind when I was at the beach, no is not the opposite. No, off is not the opposite of on, because there is no on and or off in spirit. The opposite of on is no, and that's a personal decision. So we may be speaking unconsciously using language that negates us. However, you can't turn the brain's creative power off. It's always on. So the no just gets dropped. That's your little hesitation or resistance. But the words, I feel like shit. And personally, I do not like to use language like that. It kind of hurts me energetically. It's ugly. I don't like ugly. So speak things in the most beautiful way that you can. And I remember hearing many times Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith saying, call it all good. And everything must work together for good for those who love Source, because we are creating with the power of the Creator. And when we do, we feel consciously. When we create, we feel divine. How could we not?
Indeed we do. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and we emphasize a lot that the more you can get out of the this or that model of the matrix, the more empowered you are, and the closer you are to the source of who you are. And so it's not this or that, it's a this and that and that and that and that, and they're all relevant in the infiniteness of who you are.
Yes. Absolutely.
right? And I think the do not, the negation thing, just on my answer on that, Melanie, is that through neurolinguistic programming, initially, I think when NLP first came out, there was a lot of that, the negation factor, that yes, your brain has to process the negation and bring it out, but it doesn't necessarily mean just because you say to someone, do not touch, that they'll actually touch it. It does put into their brain the process of, okay, what would touching it feel like, and then come back and then try not to do it, for sure. But based on a lot of variables in the moment, so it's contextual. It's based on what's happening in the moment, who's saying it, who's hearing it. There's a lot of variables to that kind of what we call negative suggestions, and so it's not as easy a cut and dry as saying yes, never use knots or always use knots, because there's times when it has value and times when it doesn't. So it's based on the context and everything involved in that particular context.
Yes, and so that then brings up, you do not touch. So how about a moment when everyone takes a look at the word touch and see if you can find its built-in expectation?
Ouch.
You got it right off the bat.
Yeah.
The major part of touch is ouch. So perhaps that's our fear of intimacy. If you touch me, you're going to hurt me. And that's many of our early experience. So, and then the word close, let's all get close. But if you take another look at the word close and see what it tells you.
We're close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we need to be open to get close. But there's something else also. There's close, and what else? In the word close, C-L-O-S-E.
Lose? See, lose?
Yeah, lose. So you want to get close, but you close because you're afraid if you get seen, you'll lose. So we've been trained to have faith in some invisible deity, benevolent boogeyman, that's going to damn you for the smallest nothing. So we're trained to believe in that and not ourselves. But if we are a spark of that, and we turn the creative power of our attention to embrace that, to explore it, to exalt in it and expand in it. Wow. What fun that is.
For sure. That's awesome.
Oh, and with your word, imagination, or what
Imagination?
Yeah, a magi, right. That's wonderful.
Magi, yeah.
Yes. And what I've done with it is I had to add a letter at the end, but I'm a genie. And let's take another moment and for a little word play that everyone participates in. If you look at the word enigma, which it means a significant puzzle, take a look at the word enigma, which sounds so weird. I wonder if we sound like grunting pigs when we speak enigma to people who haven't heard the language. I mean, I've always wondered, what does this language sound like to an ear that's never heard it before? And I actually have written some foreign English for native speakers using words that you can't possibly know the meaning of and then defining them, but just to hear the sound of it. But so take the word enigma, a seemingly insoluble puzzle, and play with it, and discover that it holds its own answer, what it will take to solve it.
Well, that's cool.
So
That's
can
cool.
we take like a minute or so to do that, to look at Enigma?
With Enigma?
Mhm.
All right. Let me let's see. So Melanie says Amjin.
Getting close. I mean,
She says imagine.
yes,
That's cool.
that's it.
Yeah, nicely done, Melanie. Well done.
Melanie, please contact me. You're very
Nice.
gifted. Yeah, it takes imagination to solve an enigma. And imagine is I'm a genius and or I'm a genie, and with you it's I Magi nation, a nation of Magi's, a nation of people with the magical power to connect and to co-create, commune, and elevate it collectively to the next level. So
yeah, that's great. That's great.
That is wonderful. So are these creations of some of these words with these underlining definitions and meanings, is this on purpose?
well, some most likely. But what came to me is that language is not only grammatical, it's hologrammatical as well. And so with those echoes and reflections, they become manifest in a vibration. And so we're seeing the reverberations of our own thought forms flashing back to us through the language. So I think that, and here's how I put it. So that guy, that editor in the 80s who wasn't interested in publishing psychosemantics English in translation, since I couldn't affix the 3 letters P, H, and D after my name. A few years later, I was a student of Reverend Michael Beckwith and his editor. And we, one of the class assignments was to do what this closer walk with God means to you. So I wrote a piece called First Person Singular that gave my early worldview, and then the pain it took me through, and then my evolution. It's called, First Person Singular. It's on YouTube. So I didn't think the poem was good. I had absolutely no self-esteem back then. I didn't really know I was intelligent because it wasn't reflected to me. And there was so many negative, dark projections of other people's stuff that I grew up with that I didn't have a clear sense of myself. And I came in with a very metaphysical perspective, which made this two-dimensional world even more confusing, especially all the naysayers around me, but it did set me on my path. So I turned everything, so I recited it somewhere. It was appreciated by a fellow named Matthew Marshall, who had a new age record label at the time called Virgin, it was purchased by Virgin, Higher Octave Music. He did it with a fellow named Dan Celine. And Matthew heard me perform First Person Singular and then contacted me to do an album of my verse. And he was enormously supportive. I didn't know. Anyway, after venting my rage at the state of the world in the first 2 poems, and having Matthew say, wow, that's really dark, isn't it? I then put them away for 30 years. That's how much tolerance I had left in me for more criticism. So I then, or what I interpreted as criticism, I then decided to take everything I discovered about words and to turn that into verse. And I ultimately
Nice.
received $10,000 from him, and thus was born Word Magic. And in one of the first pieces I wrote related to words, it says somewhere in the middle, now from these words you may deduce I'm the metaphysical mother goose. And my poetry's a celebration of the English language in translation. For I know the wavelength on the English channel. So I'm here to Mother Goose our usage, to help turn the tide, since our current annals reveal what a twisted tongue produces. Now, I know that you won't be surprised to hear that we've been hypnotized. So the special thing I'm here to tell is that our words create the spell, and that our problems are compounded because English is confounded. For the echoes of our history and our psyche are resounded through the symbols of the alphabet, as well as through our puns, and yet few recognize what thoughts are stirred by the secret spells of the unheard word.
Nice. That's
Thank
beautiful.
you.
That's
So,
beautiful. I love that.
Thank you so much. That's the second half of called Abrapalabra, and I believe it's also on YouTube. And so, Ross, I did not forget your question. I just gave it a preamble. And amble is, to move kind of back and forth in a, I wouldn't say lazy, a relaxed manner. Oh, there's a wonderful word for relaxation, or a phrase, Latin phrase, odium cum dignitate, leisure with dignity. So I think that's gorgeous.
I like that.
Back to your question, Ross.
Sure.
In my very lengthy fairyography, my elemental archetypal avatar, I guess you'd say, her name is Philomela Nightingale, and Philomela is another term for the nightingale, and a very dark Greek myth. But in any case, she goes through a whole journey of discovery to find out how the English tongue got forked. That's what that chapter is about.
Okay.
I don't have much memorized about it, but I got the answer to your question of how I think it happens that these linguistic oddities occur. Looking at myself on Zoom, I see next time I have to get a little glass rather than a big bottle. So my apologies.
Okay, we use bottles as well.
Yeah, it's all good.
Thank you. So
That's great.
So here's that little piece that will give you a sense of my sense of why these words do this. Why do they migrate across continents, cultures, and centuries to come into the same vibration, even if they do not have a history in common? So I call them linguistic synchronicities. And at first, so my fairy says, I will give you 2 examples. These are favorite ones of mine. The fact that praying sounds so savage, but it also sounds divine. Or how about the way the prophet has become our bottom line?
Wonderful.
Now add worship or worship, parish or perish, and you'll soon understand why the world's so nightmarish.
Wow.
So it goes on from there. But the most relevant piece to answering Ross's question, at first, I suspected the hand of collusion entangling the language to foster illusion. And I think it's quite true that a culture's theology has a great deal to do with the word's etymology and how it evolves over time to combine incompatible meanings that may undermine the original thoughts it was meant to define. But now I don't think it's planned. For the thing that I've found is that like concepts can vibrate at the very same sound and vibrate at the state that our mind designates. For words are electromagnetic vibrations whose fine alphabetic tintinnabulations can take on the tint of our true expectations, which they then imprint on our metal of mind, causing sounds to adhere when they're of the same kind. So this is a kind of alphabet algebra language. You may not get it all at once, but if you rehear it, it will open up chambers of your own consciousness, I believe. And on that video I posted, The Secret Spells of the English Language, I have that poem at the end of sharing the life sentence, and I recite it intact. I sort of dropped or mixed up a word here and there in this just a moment ago. So anyway, that's what I think.
To pray, you become the prey? The profits we earn from definitely becoming the prophets we kneel to, all while worshiping our mighty warships? Wow, see? I told you it was powerful, and this is just part one. We hope you join us as we continue to uncover more in the art of empowering your inner thoughts and harnessing the potential of verbal declarations to shape your destiny. And if you enjoyed this episode, please let us know in the comments and share any experiences you've had in playing this Scrabble board of words. Also, like and subscribe to get updates and keep us relevant in the algorithm. It's very important these days. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next Infinite Mastery experience.